like that.
Hello, my loves, and welcome back, New One Nation. Ooh, honey, over here at the Melanin Mayhem podcast, we spend a whole lot of time talking about crime and chaos and downright foolishness that real people are really committing in real time. But we needed a palate cleanser a little more often, and so your favorite country girl likes to take a little detour into the land of what if. And ooh, baby, what if the thing your mother spent your whole life trying to protect you from was your own family? You see, some people grow up surrounded with cousins and aunts and grandparents and enough family drama to last 3 reunions, honey, even a fist fight or 2. But then there are people like Brielle, only child, single mama, no family stories, no old pictures, no big mama's recipes passed down, no explanations, just silence. Silence that starts to feel suspicious when you get old enough to realize that everybody came from somewhere. Now, me personally, if my mama spent 25 years acting like an entire bloodline got abducted by aliens, I too would probably have some questions. But sometimes there are things that are buried for a reason. And curiosity? They say curiosity killed the cat. So, grab your wine, your coffee, or your emotional support blunt, whatever you do when you are minding the business of others. Because tonight, we are talking secrets, and we talking family, and we are talking about what happens when death comes knocking in 3s. This week, our Melanin Mayhem original story series brings you The Inheritance. Brielle Livingston had spent her entire life trying to figure out how a person could feel so alone sitting right next to the only family that they had. It just didn't make sense. Her mother, Corinne, she was loving, protective, present, everything a girl could want in a mother. But Corinne was also a fortress of secrets. She was like a padlocked door, and behind that door was everything that Brielle had ever wanted to know. Where they came from, who they belonged to. Why was it that every family tree project she'd ever had in school ended with Brielle writing her mother's name at the top of the page and having to pretend that that was enough? There were no grandparents, no aunts, no cousins, no stories about the old days. No, you got your daddy's nose, or you act just like your auntie. Just nothing. It was just Corinne and Brielle. Her family tree was a single twig. And Corinne did not like to talk about the Livingstons, not in any way, shape, form, or fashions. And by the time Brielle turned 25, that silence had started feeling less like protection and more like punishment. Because you see, Brielle, she had a comfortable life. She didn't want for anything. She had a good job, her own apartment, a degree on the wall, a car note, student loans that humbled her. And from the outside looking in, Brielle was polished and put together, the kind of woman that people described as mature for her age. But inside, Brielle felt like a loose leaf page torn out of somebody else's notebook. And one night, after going down a rabbit hole of family reunion pictures on Facebook, she called her mother. Corinne answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, baby." Brielle stared at a picture of a woman surrounded by cousins and other family members with babies on both hips, and paper plates were in everybody's hands. And she said, "Mama, Why won't you tell me? And then there was silence. Not confusion, not surprise, just silence. Because Corrine knew exactly what she meant. Brielle. No, I'm serious. Mom, I'm 25 years old. I'm not a child anymore. Whatever happened, whatever the reason why you left, whatever it was, I can handle it. Corrine exhaled. You don't know that. I do. No, Corrine said, and her voice dropped into something else. You don't know, baby. Now, that tone made Brielle sit up. Mama, what was it? I mean, do I have grandparents? She was met with silence. Okay, uncles, aunties, cousins, anybody. Corrine's voice was tight when she finally said, You have me and I have you. There's nothing back there for either of us except heartache, pain, and unnecessary drama. Brielle gave a dry laugh. You keep saying it like that explains anything. Oh, but it does. No, it doesn't. It explains why you don't want to go back. It doesn't explain why I don't get to know where I'm from. Corrine got quiet again. And this time the silence wasn't empty. Oh, it was full of something old, something heavy, something that Brielle had never been allowed to touch. And finally, Corrine said, Some doors stay closed for a reason. And then she hung up. You see, 25 years earlier, Brielle Livingston had stood in the hallway of her childhood home with one hand on her stomach and the other one wrapped around the strap of a duffel bag. She was 19 years old, pregnant, terrified. And downstairs, voices rise and fall like a storm. Her father's voice was the loudest. Douglas Livingston didn't argue. He declared. And when Douglas declared something, the whole house bent to his will. Corrine could still hear him. This is my house, and as long as I have breath in my body, everybody will do what I say or they will pay the consequence. Her brother Calvin pleading with him. Big Daddy, this ain't right. This has gone too far. There's still time to make it right. I won't. And then something shattered. A glass, a lamp, maybe a plate. Corrine didn't even look back long enough to figure it out. She heard her father tell her brother, Don't question me, boy. Do as I say or you can get it too. Corrine pressed both her hands over her stomach and whispered, I'm not going to let them get to you. And then she opened the back door and ran into the rain. She left that night with no money, no plan, and no intention of ever letting her daughter become another Livingston woman trapped in that house. And for 25 years, Corrine kept that promise. That is, until Brielle got curious. The DNA test came in a little white box. And Brielle told herself that it wasn't a big deal. People did these things all the time. They did it for fun, for ethnicity percentages, cute little charts, and, oh my God, I'm 12% this and 8% that. But when she spit into that tube and sealed it and dropped it in the mail, her hands were shaking because Brielle wasn't looking for percentages. She was looking for people. And 3 weeks later, the results landed in her inbox. She opened them at the kitchen table with her coffee in a cup cold beside her. And at first, it was all maps and percentages and regions and migration patterns. Brielle wasn't interested in any of that. She clicked on the tab that said DNA relatives. And there it was. Christopher Livingston. Estimated relationship, first cousin. Brielle stopped breathing. She stared at that name until the letters blurred on the screen. Livingston. Not a rumor. Not just a name her mother refused to say. A real live person. Brielle's finger hovered over the message button for almost 10 minutes. She couldn't figure out what to say. She typed, "Hi, I think we might be related." Then she deleted it. Then she typed, "This is probably weird, but my name is Brielle Livingston." Then she deleted that too. Finally, she settled on, "Hi, Christopher. My name is Brielle Livingston. According to the DNA results, we may be first cousins. My mother is Corrine Livingston. I know this may come as a surprise, but I would really love to know more about our family if you're open to talking." She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. And then she just sat there staring at the screen like Christopher was going to appear at any moment. He responded the next morning. "Brielle? As in Aunt Corrine's daughter, Brielle?" Brielle read his response 5 times. Aunt Corrine. Her mother was somebody's aunt. She had people. She quickly replied to Christopher's message and asked him would he be open to a phone call. He said yes, and so she sent him her phone number. Christopher called her that night, and from the first hello, he sounded like family. Easy, like Sunday morning, warm and a little country, like somebody she should have already known. "Well, I be damned," he said, laughing. "Aunt Corrine got a whole daughter out here and didn't tell nobody." Brielle was smiling so hard her cheeks was hurting. "She doesn't really talk about family." "Yeah," Christopher said, and something in his voice shifted. "I can understand that." There it was, that little hesitation or something. But he recovered quickly, and he steered the conversation to a topic that Brielle was dying to know more about. He told her about the Livingstons, about Douglas Livingston, her grandfather, that everybody called Big Daddy, who still lived in the family house over on Briar Road. He told her about Aunt Loretta, Corrine's oldest sister, who ran everybody's business but her own. He told her about Calvin, Corrine's brother, who also happened to be Christopher's father, who had also been in prison for years. He told her about Dorothy, Douglas's sister, and everybody said that she was slow, but Christopher said, "Don't let Dot fool you, honey. Aunt Dot know more than Google." Brielle laughed at that. She asked questions until her phone was just almost on E. And for the first time in her life, she could picture something bigger than just her and her mother. She had a family. Messy, probably. Complicated? Absolutely. But it was hers. Before they hung up, Christopher said, "You know, I always wondered about Aunt Corrine." "Why?" Brielle asked. "Because everyone said she was never coming back. I've never met her, only heard her name mentioned a time or two. She's like he who must not be named. And until you hit me up, I really thought that she was a myth." Brielle was quiet. Christopher said, "Look, I'm not trying to scare you or anything. I'm just saying, this family has history." "What kind of history?" Christopher paused before he responded. The kind that people don't write down." 2 weeks later, Douglas Livingston died. Corrine knew before Brielle did. You see, she had kept tabs on the town for years. That was the thing that Brielle didn't know. Corrine might have left, but she never fully left. Every few months, she would research a local paper for, the obituaries, any court notices and public notices of the such. Just enough to know who was dead, who was locked up, and who was still breathing. So when Douglas's obituary appeared online, Corrine saw it. She sat at her kitchen table for almost 20 minutes, just staring at the screen. Douglas Edward Livingston, 78, of Briar Road, departed this life. Departed. Corrine almost laughed. Her father had never departed from anything quietly in his life. She closed her laptop. What she did not do was call Brielle. She did not book a hotel room because she did not plan to attend. She made herself a cup of tea and sat in the dark and whispered the words that she had been trying not to think about since she read the obituary. Death comes in threes. Brielle found out about her grandfather's passing from Christopher. He called her after work. "Hey, cousin." That still made her smile. "Hey, cuz." His voice was softer than usual. You sitting down, cousin?" Brielle's stomach tightened. "What happened? What's wrong?" "It's our granddaddy. Big Daddy passed away last night." Brielle sat on the edge of her bed. A man she had never met was dead. And still, grief hit her in a strange, sideways sort of way. It was odd because it wasn't like she knew him, but now she never would. Oh no, what happened? It was a car accident. The roads were wet and he lost control and hit a tree. Oh no, that's horrible. When is the funeral? Saturday. That was 5 days away. So, do you think you and your mom will be coming down for the funeral? I mean, as morbid as it sounds, it's a perfect setting to meet all of your kin people at once because everybody will be here for the reading of the will. Brielle chewed on her finger as she thought about how her mother would take this news. Surely she would want to say goodbye to her father. "Of course we'll be there, Christopher," Brielle said quickly. Brielle and Christopher chatted for a few more minutes and then they hung up. Brielle was heartbroken thinking of how she would have to break the news to her mom. Even though she was estranged from her family, nobody wanted to hear the news that a parent had died. Brielle practiced in her head how she was going to approach it with Corrine. And after crying a few tears for a grandfather she never knew, she drove to her mother's house. Corrine opened the door, looking kind of tired. "Brielle, what's wrong, baby?" "Hey, Mama. I have to tell you something, but I need you to sit down first," Brielle said. Corrine's face flushed with worry. "What is it, baby? Is something wrong with you? Are you pregnant?" Corrine asked. "No, Mom, it's not me. I'm fine." "Whew, you scared me. Well, as long as you're okay, I can deal with anything else." Brielle took a deep breath and said, "Mom, it's your dad. My grandfather is dead." Brielle waited with bated breath, ready to be the rock her mother needed. But there was nothing. Corrine was calm, cool, and collected. As a matter of fact, it didn't look like this was news to her. "You knew." Corrine was frozen for a moment, and then she said, "How could you possibly know anything about him or his death, Brie?" Brielle couldn't believe what she was seeing. "You knew he was dead." Corrine's face changed just enough to answer for her. Brielle laughed a dry laugh, but there was nothing funny. "Oh my God, you knew." "Brielle, baby, answer me." "No, don't baby me. My cousin Christopher told me." Corrine's eyes sharpened. "How do you know Christopher? How could you possibly know him or how to get in contact with him?" Brielle was so full of fury that she missed the fact that her mother looked deathly afraid. She just stood there seething in her own self-righteous anger. Yes, I know I'm not supposed to know anything about my family, but fortunately, we live in the information age and I don't have to wait on my mother to tell me what I want to know. I did a DNA test and I found my family. He's my cousin, my actual cousin, one of the people you spent my whole life pretending didn't exist. Corrine stepped back. Sit down, Brielle. No. Were you even going to tell me at all? Corrine didn't answer. Brielle just nodded, tears just flowing down her face. You were really going to let me miss my grandfather's funeral, too. You didn't know him. Because of you. That landed. Corine flinched like Brielle had slapped her. Brielle's voice was cracking. You knew how bad I wanted this. You knew I've spent my whole life feeling like I just dropped out of the sky. And you had a whole family sitting somewhere, breathing, living, dying. And you just decided I didn't deserve to know them. Corine's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't about deserving. Then what was it about? Corine looked past her daughter, out into the dark. Fear moved across her face so quickly that Brielle almost missed it. Almost. It was about surviving. Death comes in threes, and I don't want you or me to get caught up in it. Brielle softened for a half a second, and then the hurt came back. I'm not you, Mama. I don't believe in stupid superstitions. Corine looked at her. No, she said quietly. You're not me. You've always been so trusting, so believing that there is good in all people. And that's what scares me. You have no idea what my family is capable of. Well, maybe if you told me, instead of being so damn mysterious, I wouldn't have to guess, now would I? Brielle snatched open the door and ran out. Corine held out for 2 days. Then she gave in. Not because she wanted to, but because Brielle wanted to go. And she just couldn't take one more day of the silent treatment from the person she loved the most in this world. The look in her daughter's eyes reminded Corine too much of herself, determined, wounded, ready to run towards the thing that might destroy her. So they drove south that Friday afternoon. Brielle talked too much at first because she was nervous. Corine barely spoke at all. The closer they got to her mother's hometown, the tighter Corine's hands gripped the steering wheel. At one point, Brielle said, Mama, you scaring me. What's wrong? Corine didn't look over. She just said, good. Brielle blinked. What do you mean, good? I didn't mean it like that. Then how do you mean it? Corine pulled into the hotel parking lot just as the sun was starting to set. She turned the car off, but she didn't get out. For just a minute, she just sat there. And then she turned to Brielle and said, listen to me. And something in her voice made Brielle just stop. When we get around these people, don't let nobody make you feel too comfortable too fast. Brielle frowned. What does that mean? It means in this family, the loud ones ain't the dangerous ones. Brielle swallowed. Corine kept going. And when somebody tells you what not to ask, she looked Brielle directly in her eyes. That's exactly what a truth is. Brielle just stared at her. Mama, what is happening here? Corine's mouth trembled, and for one brief second, Brielle thought she was finally going to spill it. Finally, the padlock was going to open. But Corine only whispered, I should have never brought you back here. The funeral was held at New Hope Baptist Church. It's a white building with red carpet and wooden pews, women in black hats and men in dark suits, and everybody watching. Brielle felt the stairs before she even stepped all the way into the sanctuary. Ooh, honey, the whispers moved through that church like wind through dry leaves. That's Corrine. She came back. Ooh, that must be the daughter. Look just like, ain't nobody seen her. Child, she look just like. The whisper stopped when Corrine turned her head, but Brielle, she caught it. Look just like who? She asked. Corrine said nothing. Christopher found them near the back of the church. He was taller than Brielle had expected. Handsome in a familiar way, like his face had pieces of people that she should know but didn't quite know how to put all the pieces together just yet. He gave her a hug like he meant it. Cousin. Brielle held on just a little too long. She needed somebody in that room to help her feel safe. And then Christopher turned to Corrine. Aunt Corrine. Corrine nodded at him. Christopher. It felt like there was history in the space between them, but Brielle didn't know how to read it. And across the room, a woman in a black fitted dress stared at Corrine like she wanted to drag her through the parking lot. Christopher leaned over to Brielle. That's Aunt Loretta. Loretta Livingston looked exactly like the kind of woman who had never once apologized for anything in her life first. She had a sharp bob and even sharper eyes. The grief on her face? Yes, but there was control in her posture. She approached them slowly. Corrine, Loretta. 25 years collapsed into one word. Loretta's eyes flickered over to Brielle. This must be the girl. The girl? Not my niece. This is your daughter? The girl. Brielle lifted her chin. I am Brielle. Loretta smiled without warmth. Of course you are. Before Brielle could respond, a soft voice behind her said, You got her eyes. Brielle turned, and there was an older woman that stood there in a wrinkled dress with one glove on and one glove missing. Her hair was pinned crooked, but her gaze, it was clearer than everybody else's. Christopher said, Hi, Aunt Dot. Dorothy Livingston smiled at Brielle. You got Corey's eyes, but that ain't all you got. Corrine stiffened. Dorothy looked at her and smiled even wider. Hey, Corey. Hi, Aunt Dorothy. Dorothy reached out and touched Brielle's hand. You shouldn't have come, pretty. Brielle blinked and said, What? Dorothy just kept patting her hand. This family takes pretty things and breaks them. And then she wandered away towards the front pew. Brielle looked at Christopher, questions all over her face, and Christopher just gave a little nervous laugh. Aunt Dorothy says stuff. Don't pay her no mind. She don't mean no harm, but, her elevator don't go all the way to the top. Corrine didn't laugh. She just turned away. The funeral itself was beautiful in the way that Southern funerals are. Too many flowers, too many songs, too many people standing up to talk about a man that they feared more than they loved. Douglas Livingston was described as a provider, a businessman, a pillar of the community, a man of order and of vision. And Corrine sat beside Brielle with her hands folded in her lap and her face unreadable. But when the pastor said that Douglas had kept his family together, Corrine snorted. Brielle saw it and heard it all. There was no amusement, no joy. It almost felt like disgust. And after the burial, everyone was instructed to meet at the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. This was Brielle's first clue that this family did grief differently. There would be no going to the repast first, no plates of funeral food being passed around, nobody saying, "Come get you something to eat, baby." Just cemetery dirt still fresh on their shoes and everybody headed downtown to find out who got what. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. Someone had set out styrofoam cups and sugar packets and powdered creamer in a silver urn near the back wall. Aunt Loretta stood near the beverage table, her purse tucked under her arm like she was waiting to collect what was already hers. She walked over to Corrine and said, I guess you're the prodigal daughter, huh? It's crazy. In all these years, you didn't know your way home, but as soon as Big Daddy's body is cold, here you go. Her voice dripping with venom. Corrine looked at her sister and said, "If it wasn't for my daughter, I would have never come back here. I was prepared to go the rest of my life without ever seeing any of you ever again." And then she turned and walked away. Christopher stayed close to Brielle. "You okay, cousin?" "No," Brielle said honestly. He nodded. "I feel that." Corrine came and stood next to Brielle and said, "I'm going to go get me some coffee." Now, Brielle almost asked her to wait. She didn't know why. Maybe it was because her mother had been acting like every room had a trap door. Or maybe it was because Aunt Dorothy's words were still bouncing around in her head. Or maybe Brielle was just paranoid. But before Brielle could say anything, Corrine was already at the coffee table and she poured herself a cup and added sugar, no creamer because she always hated creamer. And across the room, Loretta watched. So did Calvin's son. So did two cousins Brielle hadn't been introduced to. Okay, Brielle really felt like she was being paranoid now. The lawyer called everyone to sit down, and Brielle sat between Corrine and Christopher. The lawyer cleared his throat, and he began the bequests. The first things were small accounts, personal effects, vehicles, a little money here, a little money there. And then he paused. Loretta sat up straighter. The lawyer looked down at the papers. "The residence, located at 114 Briar Road, including all surrounding acreage, shall transfer in full to my daughter, Corrine Elaine Livingston." The room went silent. Not quiet, I'm talking silent. The kind of silent that follows a gunshot. Loretta stood up. "What in the hell? I knew this was a setup, you lying whore. How did you get Big Daddy to change his will?" The lawyer looked uncomfortable. Corrine looked like the air had been knocked out of her. "No," she whispered. Brielle turned to her. "Mama?" Loretta's voice still rising. "That house was supposed to be mine." The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Livingston amended this will 6 months ago." "6 months!" Loretta snapped. Christopher looked at Brielle, then he looked away. Corrine gripped the arms of the chair. "No," she said again. "I don't want any of it." The lawyer nodded slowly. "The will does include a provision in the event that you decline." Corrine turned sharply. "What provision?" But before he could answer, Corrine started coughing. Once, twice, then harder. Brielle touched her arm. "Mama?" Corrine's eyes widened. She coughed even harder, one hand flying to her throat. The room erupted. It was all too fast, in slow motion at the same time for Brielle. Somebody yelled for water. Somebody else shouted to call 911. Corrine stood up, staggering, knocking her coffee cup to the floor. The dog liquid just spread across the carpet. Brielle caught her before she fell. "Mama!" Corrine clawed at her throat, her face twisting in panic. Brielle screaming for help. Christopher was beside her instantly. I called an ambulance. It's coming. Corinne's eyes locked on Brielle's. Even through the chaos, through all the shouting, Loretta was screaming like a banshee. Corinne was trying to speak. Brielle leaned in close. What, Mama? What, Mama? What is it? Corinne forced the words out of her closing throat. Don't trust. Her body jerked. Brielle sobbing. Mama, don't trust who? Mama, Mama. Corinne's eyes shifted. Not to Loretta, not to the lawyer, towards the coffee table. And then her hand went slack. Aunt Dorothy just sat there at the table, most unbothered by all the chaos. She just said to nobody in particular, death comes in threes, huh? At the hospital, nobody said allergic reaction at first. They used softer words, medical words, unknown triggers, airway constriction, anaphylaxis. It was too fast. It was too severe. They tried everything that they could. And that was the phrase that Brielle hated the most. They tried, as if trying could matter when her mother was dead. Brielle Livingston, the only family Brielle had ever known, had come back to town after escaping and had died less than 48 hours later, a week after her father. Death comes in threes. That phrase kept bouncing around Brielle's mind. Aunt Dorothy said it in the conference room. Her mother had said it when she tried to convince Brielle that coming back was a mistake. Brielle sat in that hospital hallway with Corinne's purse in her lap and Christopher sitting beside her. He didn't say much. He just stayed and he held her hand. And in that moment she was grateful because the woman who had been her whole world was gone. And the only person left sitting with her was a cousin she found through a DNA test less than a month ago. A doctor came, then a nurse. There were forms to fill out, arrangements to be made. And as Brielle sat there in that hallway, the lawyer arrived. His tie was loose, his face solemn. Ms. Livingston. Brielle looked up. She was too tired to correct him. That was my mama. The lawyer swallowed. I'm sorry to disturb you here, but there is something that you need to know. Christopher sat up. Brielle's fingers tightened around her mother's purse. The lawyer glanced at Christopher and then back to Brielle. Under the terms of your grandfather's amended will, if your mother was deceased or unwilling to accept the property, he paused. Brielle already felt the room tilting. The inheritance passes to her living heir. The house now belongs to you. How is that even possible? Brielle asked. Did my grandfather know about me? Christopher took her hand and said, Don't worry about any of that. It'll all be okay, cuz. And somewhere deep in Brielle's memory, her mother's warning rose up like smoke. When somebody tells you not to ask, that's exactly where the truth is. Then she remembered what Aunt Dorothy had said. This family breaks pretty things. Brielle looked down at her mother's purse, then at Christopher, then back to the lawyer. And for the first time it occurred to her that maybe her mother hadn't died because she came home. Maybe she died because somebody knew she was about to own that house. And if death really did come in threes, was Brielle next? Ooh, New One Nation, baby. Something has got this family all up in my spirit, baby. So let's recap real quick. Let's see. Brielle finds that she got family that her mama done spent 25 years hiding from. Her granddaddy dies mysteriously. Her mother comes home reluctantly and somehow drops dead. Drinking coffee at the reading of a will, getting an inheritance she didn't even want. And ooh, now this damn house, it belongs to Brielle? Baby, something in the milk ain't clean. But here's where it get interesting, my loves. You know, if you are new to the Melanin Mayhem original story series, let me explain how this all works. Because you see, this ain't your regular story time over here. Over here, we do things a little different. You see, with the Melanin Mayhem original story series, we like choices, darling. That means that we have more than one ending for you to take for your listening pleasure. Oh yes, baby, there are three different roads, 3 different truths. And each week I am going to drop an alternate ending. And trust me when I tell you the twists and the turns of it all, darling. I mean, one choice, we could uncover a deadly family conspiracy. Or maybe in another choice, we could expose some secrets that Corrine done spent the last 25 years trying to keep buried. And ooh, we could always take it somewhere where, blood don't always make you family. The places we could go with this story. And if you want access to all 3 alternate endings of The Inheritance, go ahead and head on over to the subscriber side of things at melaninmayhempodcast.supercast.com because that's where the full chaos lives, my darlings. Until next time, remember, sometimes the people hiding the truth from you, they ain't lying to hurt you. Sometimes they lying to keep you alive.
Woo-wee, Nana, you did that.